Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. Erik Skopil on the show. As always, I'm Matt Prehm. Today, we're going to be joined by 24/7 national recruiting analyst Cooper Petagna, guy on the evals, guy on the scouting reports, the portal news. You do it all, Coop. How's it going, man?
It's going well, man. It's been busy couple of weeks, obviously with the transfer portal, and glad to get the top 100 behind us as well. And then signing day, February signing day, which we had, I don't know if you guys noticed, I think it was a 4-hour show. Had to give Andrew Ivins an IV at the end of it. So it's good, man. We're coming up for air, which is nice. It'll be a nice little break. And then the second portal window starts in April. And then we already had a meeting talking about 2026 today. So we're right on track.
Let's go back to 2025 for a second, though. I'm going to assume the first person for this answer is Dorian Moore. So let's kind of maybe eliminate him from the conversation for a second. Whose film on Oregon did you enjoy watching, evaluating, scouting?
Wow, that's a great question. I like that a lot. Naeem Offer was a guy in my area that was a really intriguing athlete, and I think that's kind of what comes up. People love talking about the athlete and Naeem Offer just in terms of what he can do, but I think a lot of people didn't really know where to put him. Is he a corner? Is he going to be a guy that moves inside? He can do so many different things, but was really the best with the ball in his hands. You think about him just in the return game as well. He's a playmaker. So I liked him, obviously familiar in that region, but the guy that really kind of stood out to me and for the rest of our group that climbed our board relatively quickly was Brandon Finney, and a guy that we got aggressive with. And obviously at the buzzer, he moves outside of the top 32 range, but man, you talk about a guy that's got elite traits with the length, the size, the speed, the athleticism, the position versatility as well. He's going to continue to grow, be over 200 pounds. So, yeah, those two guys, and it's hard to do, right? Because when you're talking about Oregon's class, I mean, we're talking about 20 prospects that are either 4 or 5 stars, right? We haven't seen that done since 2013 in USC. So this class is pretty remarkable in its own right.
Yeah, that was a cool stat after I think Toby Hostrip got the ratings bump to get that to be unanimous blue chip. That was a cool stat. Like, I just think, and you mentioned it, so I'm not going to ask you to follow up on it, but I don't know if our listeners, we haven't talked about that. Of just like, this is now a class where has been over 10 years where you had a class where every single guy was a 4 or 5 star. It sort of speaks to what they've done here. And we're going to do mostly portal, I think, Matt, ultimately on this. Yeah. But I just wanted to get, like, Oregon doesn't play a lot of true freshmen. And so I want to set the stage a little bit. I'm obviously not asking you, Cooper, to put on your predictive cap and tell us who's playing this year. But are there guys in this 25 class that you look at and say some of those traits seem to translate in a way where you wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if they ended up carving out some kind of a role early on?
Well, let's talk about Dorian Moore, right? I mean, since we kind of pivoted away from him because he's low-hanging fruit. But you think about Oregon and what they have departing. Tej Johnson's gone. You think about Trayshawn Holden, he's gone. Terrence Ferguson was a staple in that passing game as well. And then you look at it opposite of Evan Stewart, they're going to need some guys to step up. And Dorian Moore, I think served a really strong reminder to us at the Polynesian Bowl, just the way that he was wired, not only physically and the type of gifts that he has, but the type of competitor that he is. And I think anytime that you're studying prospects from the state of Texas that have played at such a high level, it's easy to get really numb to the high level of success that they've had over the years. But Dorian Moore has been one of those guys that I kind of compared a little bit to Malik Neighbors. He's a spark plug, just in terms of the run after catch ability, the strength and aggressiveness at the catch point as well. You can move him around. You can do a lot of different things. So, yeah, not only does he have the skill set that translates to an early impact player, but he's also a guy just in terms of the way that he's wired from a competitive temperament standpoint and the high level of competition that he's played over the last couple of years. I would expect him to have a sizable impact for Oregon, and I don't think that's beyond him at all.
Let's shift to portal here for a second. Malik Benson's an intriguing name for me at the receiver position. He didn't do a ton at Alabama in 2023. This past year at Florida State, even fewer numbers from a production standpoint. I think quarterback play probably impacted things there. He plays a position that is largely dependent upon what your quarterback can do. But what are you guys seeing that still shows the good potential to give him the 4-star rating? And what's it about the fit at Oregon that maybe gives Oregon some intrigue here for a position that's losing a lot?
Andrew Ivins and I talk about this a lot, but we call it like, is he a member of the 9 Lives Club, right? And you look at Malik Benson, you go all the way back to what he was perceived to be coming out of junior college. Obviously, that hasn't worked out at neither Alabama nor Florida State. And even still, you turn on the tape and you see flashes of what the player can be. And I think that's really the big thing. And for him, he feels like a lot bigger body than he is, listed at 6'1". He feels a lot longer. He's got a wide strike zone and catch radius in terms of what he offers. But I really like him in a complementary role. I think a lot of people have really kind of perceived him maybe as a guy that would be a potential number 1 receiver. Now stepping into Eugene, that's not going to be the case, right? A lot of talent obviously there on the perimeter and talent that needs to continue to grow and develop. But Malik Benson kind of comes as the journeyman, where I think this is a unique situation for him to where he can really blossom in a complementary role. And that's kind of what I expect. I mean, we put a late day 3 on Malik Benson. And if it doesn't come together, I still think that's going to be a guy that a lot of teams are going to view as a priority free agent, just what he offers from a height, weight, speed standpoint. So still really intriguing. And, you know, I'll say this. Receiver is the deepest room in the entire transfer portal, within the realm of the top 400 prospects in the country that we have graded. So I want to bring that back to say Oregon could have gone a lot of different directions here. So I think the fact that they're bringing in Malik Benson, and we know Oregon from a talent identification standpoint, they're really well prepared, and they've showed their teeth there, especially in the transfer portal over the last couple of years. So I like the fit, and I think it takes a lot of pressure off Malik Benson, where he can go in there and impact this offense in a role to where maybe people have expected more of him, and now it just let it come to him. Strong running game. Obviously, like I said, they have those assets outside of him as well. So I think it should be a nice fit there.
Coop, I want to ask you a process question, because you've obviously done prep analysis for a bit, and portal's a new kind of an animal. What it differs in terms of how you and your staff and everybody involved is evaluating and then ranking portal players? Like, is it a big difference from what you see on the prep side, or what can you say about? Because I'm curious. This is a totally different industry, basically, for us at 24/7. I'm wondering kind of what you can speak to on that side of things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not an exact science, and that's kind of the cool part about it. You know, I mean, it's like, in a way, all of us, everybody who's doing this, it doesn't matter what company you're working at, you're kind of pioneering a new space, right? And you're trying to figure out, how do you balance that projection of the athlete that still has time to learn, develop, mature on the field physically, technically as well, with, okay, what have they shown from a production standpoint too? So, you know, for us, we have a formula that, you know, we're not beholden to, but it's a really good starting point for us. I mean, you talk about, all right, what is this player in terms of the NFL upside? That's about, you know, that's part of it, right? What's another part of it is, what is their projected production, right? So like Makai Hughes, I know we're going to talk about it. I know everybody's very eager to talk about Makai Hughes.
Sure.
But Makai Hughes, you know, he's a good example, and I'm just using him as an example. What is a guy that's rushed for over 1,200 yards in each of the last 2 seasons from the group of 5? What does that look like in the Big Ten, right? So you have to kind of take that into consideration as well. And then, you know, what's their timeline for peak performance, and what's the level of competition, the way that you view an FCS product versus one that has played at the group of 5 level versus the Power 4 level. There's a lot of different variables. So, you know, we use that formula to give us really a jumping off point. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to subjective knowledge and experience of, okay, what have you seen from these players? And how do you think they kind of fit into the next level? And not so much, let me be very clear here, not does how player X fit into this program, and that's going to be what drives the rating, but how does player X or Y fit into that level of competition, and then that projection beyond Saturdays as well. So a lot of different things that go into it. And like I said, I mean, the beautiful part about this is everybody can have their opinion. You know, I can have my opinion on a player and what I think the impact that he'll have on Saturdays, and maybe we have a different opinion on what that impact will look like on Sundays. But all of it is kind of taken into the realm of possibilities when you're trying to figure out, all right, what's this player going to look like, not only on Saturdays in 2025, but the potential of the player beyond.
Bear Alexander is another name that's a popular name. He's going on now his third school, coming to Oregon. Enters a room where they're going to lose a lot of talent, and there's going to be an opportunity to play. I'm just curious of where are his strengths? Where does he have to get better at on the college field to kind of get back to, being that potential NFL guy? And he's got 2 years to do it.
Yeah, his lack of continuity has hindered his short-term development. That being said, he's got a real shot, real opportunity, and there's reasons that programs like Oregon keep swinging, right? Because there's something that he's put on tape, and there's something that he provides that is really, really difficult to find. I mean, you're talking about a guy that, situationally can line up 1 tech, 3 tech, 5 technique. You can do a lot of different things with him. So position flex, the athlete in terms of he's everything you want from an NFL traits Sunday standpoint. You got to get him right? And over the last 2 seasons at USC, it's been a lot of up and downs. And you go all the way back to high school, he transferred multiple times. So continuity is really important for him. And what Oregon's got here, similar to what LSU has with Patrick Payton, you have very high caliber, high ceiling athletes that when they put it together, they show day one top 50 pick potential. Now, the carrot at the end of the stick is that they got to get it right? Their time's up. So they have a 1-year audition to get right in the environments that Bear Alexander is going into, one with Dan Lanning, with championship pedigree, and obviously the way that Oregon has put this program together under Lanning over the last couple of years. This is going to be an environment for him. It's like he either gets with it or he's out of there. And I think Oregon strategically understands that. They understand that they have a strong locker room. They understand that they have a strong product. They understand that they have an incredibly high standard. And for Bear Alexander, you either meet that standard or you move on, and then you risk throwing away the rest of your career. You talk to NFL evaluators who talk about Bear Alexander, and it's like there's a lot of what they call alerts in the NFL around this kid, just in terms of his inability to stay on the field. That being said, when he's on the field, when it's good, it's good. And then where he needs to improve is the run game consistency, quite honestly. He's too physically talented to get moved off the ball as much as he does. That being said, this is a quick turn away from him being able to get back on track and be considered a potential day 2 NFL draft choice. So, which I think all the physical clay is there. Can Oregon get enough out of him? And I'm totally get where they're coming from in terms of taking a swing on him.
Cooper, full disclosure, there are 2 portal players that the recent ranking update, which happened, I think, on Monday of this week, that really kind of stood out to me. And let's start with the first, which was the big mover up, Isaiah World, going from, I think, number 24 all the way to number 1. Oregon's going to need a new left tackle with Josh Connerly going. You look at the NFL draft projections, this guy might be replacing a first-round pick potentially. What makes you guys so confident that he's a 5-star caliber player, and maybe just broadly, like what makes him a player that you think could be a good replacement for a Josh Connerly there?
Well, he's started over 30 plus games, right? So he is one of the most experienced offensive linemen in the portal. I think one that jumps out. The other thing that jumps out, size, right? 6'8", 320 pounds, and he carries it exceptionally well. The third point, up until maybe 24, 48 hours before, we actually had Damon Wilson number 1 in the portal. And I was coming back from a trip in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, where I'd watched Josh Connerly all week, and I wasn't just focused on him. You're focused on obviously both sides of the line of scrimmage. But the thing that has stood out to me throughout this entire portal process is that especially these guys that are being considered as high draft picks and guys that are being coveted in the portal, they're not perfect. They're honestly far from it. And you look at Josh Connerly and you talk to NFL scouts and they're still like, yeah, this guy's raw. But, my last exposure point to him is at Rainier Beach. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy is 285 pounds, he's a basketball player, he's a two-way guy. He's got a ways to go. But Oregon and the league, Terry, they've done a good job getting him ready for the next level to where now he is viewed as a potential day 1 draft pick. This, when it came to Isaiah World and why we ranked him where he did, it had a lot to do with Josh Connerly. I saw Josh Connerly in Mobile. I went back to the tape and I watched Isaiah World. best competition. I just quite simply thought he was further ahead than Josh Connerly is at this point. Between the feet, between the play strength, between the polish. I like where Isaiah World is. And that being said, he's still got a ways to go, and that should be an exciting thing for Oregon fans. But I mean, if this guy clicks, man, this is what every single team in the NFL is looking for. And you go back to a year ago, I think there are 7 tackles taken in the first round of the NFL draft. You look at Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks. If you were to slide them into last draft, maybe they're tackles 6 and 7, right? In that draft. This year they're 1 and 2. So everybody's looking for these type of players. And, even if you consider a tackle to have round 2 value, they're probably going to get drafted in the first. So that goes for World, Xavier Chaplin, Howard Sampson, all these big functional athletic bodies. Teams are going to find a way to make them work in their system. And I think schematic fit means a lot too. He was the one guy at the end of the day who's like, we're going to bet on a guy. We're going to bet on a guy with that type of size, athleticism, experience, that NFL evaluators, even if he turns in a so-so season next year, teams are going to be looking for a reason to talk themselves into a talent like Isaiah World.
Sorry. Big picture, last 3 years now, Lanning's had an opportunity to hit the portal. Has there been any kind of trends or just takeaways, that overarching themes that you think are impressive or you've liked how they've operated? Because locally, Eric and I are always just pretty impressed of, it seems like almost every one of them they hit, but we don't have that big picture view on the program.
Well, I think they know who they are. I always talk about teams and programs with an identity, and from a scouting identity, like, I always say teams in the NFL that kind of jump out are like Baltimore Ravens. They know who they are. There are a lot of teams, right? Patriots under Belichick, they have a certain feel and for certain type of player that kind of fits their organization. And collegiately, now with high school and now with the transfer portal, of blending those two processes, Oregon feels the same way, right? And you said it. I mean, this is going on. What years are we going on of Dan Lanning here? 4, right? So he's established his program, his identity, and the type of cultural fit that he wants. And yeah, I mean, you look from Isaiah World to Emmanuel Pregnon, another guy that's got over 30 starts, right, between USC and Wyoming. You go down the line, Teron Johnson coming over from Northwestern. And, from a height, weight, speed standpoint, like, I want to talk about him a little bit, under 6 feet. But you talk about the football instincts show up all over the tape, and a guy that I think can slide inside, play nickel, and is position versatile, and is a guy that's going to come in, pick it up immediately, plug and play type of players. So Oregon's one of those teams where they're at the apex of every year is going to be, how do we get back to a national championship? How do we get back into that conversation? And, I said it on the broadcast on Wednesday that they've done a beautiful job not only building the foundation from the high school side, and you guys mentioned it, a lot of these guys aren't playing, which is, that's a positive thing. You look at the projected first round right now, I think only 8 of the top 32 players to go in the first, depending on what websites you look at, are guys that have transferred, right? So you think about that continuity, the importance of continuity, and what that means to your program. I think Oregon is now in a spot from a free agency standpoint where they can really kind of pick their spots of who they want. And they've done a tremendous job, and be able to sell the program to players like Dylan Dynaman and saying, all right, hey, you're coming off a little bit of a downtick in production. We know what caliber of player you are. Safeties are obviously hard to find, but just in terms of the way that they've been developing, they've made it a really, really player-friendly place in terms of, hey, not only come here and help us compete for a championship, but we're going to get you right for Sundays too. So I don't think that's lost on any of those guys out there.
Cooper, let's do the Makai Hughes thing a little bit more, because this was one where I think fans were super excited about World's ranking. You mentioned Dylan Thieneman moving up from like 73 to 10 or something like that. There was this positive trajectory. And then the one that I kept getting was, what's going on with Makai Hughes? Super productive, 2 years at Tulane, coming in, kind of people have penciled him as a starter, and maybe a conversation, can he outproduce what Jordan James did? And this felt like a little bit of cold water. Is it cold water? Should it be seen that way? What can you say about this guy that the Ducks?
I mean, I'll say this: even at Oregon, right? Even when you're like just doing what they're doing every year and on-field success and all that type of stuff, like having players in your backfield or wherever that are considered NFL draft choices, that's a good thing, right? And I'll just put it there. Makai Hughes is one of those guys. Came out of Birmingham, surprised us. He was in my region, and a guy that I was low on. Coming out, quite honestly, goes to Tulane, has all this success over the last 2 seasons. And it goes back to the earlier conversation that we're having about, all right, what does this look like when you take a player from this type of background and you put him here in a Power 5 program and in the Big Ten, and what is that going to look like? I'll give you my 2 cents on Hughes. I think he's a productive player. I think he's going to fit right in. It goes back to what I was just saying about speed, toughness, instincts, guys that are plug and play. And I think he's a pro's pro. And I don't think there's really going to be that much of a drop-off between Makai Hughes and Jordan James and what we saw there. A guy like, I think when you start projecting to the NFL, maybe that's kind of where it comes in a little bit. What does that look like? Is he a guy that's going to make a back end of a 53-man roster? Yes. But I think at best case scenario, you're probably looking at this guy middle of day 3, 5th round, right? And I think at the floor, probably looking at him at 7. I think he's a better version of a guy that we had at Washington, Myles Gaskin, who bounced around the league for a while because he had all those things. He was tough. He was dependable. He had third down ability, and he could create hidden yardage. And I think Makai Hughes playing behind those guys like Isaiah World and Emmanuel Pregnon and the rest of the guys that I'm not mentioning, he's going to be exactly what they need. So I don't want the rating or the ranking to take away from the type of player that he is and what value that he's going to serve Oregon, just in terms of the projection and the projected production. Do I expect a 1,300-yard season like he had coming off of Tulane? No, not at this point. Would it shock me if he had one? No, either. That being said, I don't know how much that's going to fluctuate in terms of kind of how we see the Sunday prospect. And, he's going to be a above average starter in the Big Ten. And I think that's something, if you're an Oregon fan, you should be excited about that.
Coop, for my last question, I want to go back to high school for a second because you've got the unique experience of covering the country from a recruiting standpoint, but also working here at Oregon previously. This week for signing day, Oregon had an in-house streamed show where they interviewed coordinators. Dan Lanning spoke, and also their GM, Marshall Malco. And he threw out the comment that he felt like the 2026 class out west is as good as it's ever been during their time here. And it's good enough to build a class that can win a national championship out west. Being as someone who has seen the country and also worked out here, I'm not going to ask you about the players specifically, but how much of an advantage is that going to be for Oregon and their recruiting efforts where they try to go national, and they said that they'll still recruit nationally, but knowing that there's so many guys out west that if you focused all there, you could build an elite class. Like, how much of an advantage is that going to be, or an opportunity for an advantage for this staff at Oregon this year, knowing the steps they have to recruit nationally to bring the best players here?
Right. I think recruiting out west in terms of like for an outfit like Oregon, where you feel like, all right, I can build this thing, maybe, 70-75% of my class just staying here within the West Coast footprint. Like, you got to capitalize on that. And I think the other thing is Marshall's probably being pretty smart by putting that out in the public because, USC is making some changes, right? They brought over Chad Bowden from Notre Dame. And, I think they're going to make a concerted effort to reclaim the throne out west. Now, that being said, because they've been down over the last however many years and they pretty much ignored the West Coast, Dan Lanning and Oregon have laid claim to that. So that's going to make it more difficult. But yeah, I mean, I think same way we saw it, your footprint is always your priority. So you have to take care of your priority, right? There's no reason for you to go to Florida, Georgia, Texas, any of these places, unless there's a guy like Dorian Moore. And now you have one of the strongest brands in all of college football, and it makes sense, right? So I think they're going to be calculated. They understand the full strength of their program, especially from an alignment standpoint, an NIL standpoint. So if there's an opportunity to improve the roster outside of the West Coast footprint, they'll do that. That being said, if all's even and everything checks out, then there's no reason to leave the footprint, because the other thing is those are going to be the guys of future generations that you're going to resonate with. You know, they're going to be the guys out of Las Vegas. They're going to be the guys out of Salt Lake. They're going to be the guys out of Southern California that have seen some version of themselves go to Oregon, rep that brand, and have success. And that's important, right? So it's important to be able to guard your region, protect your region, and acquire the best players in the region. And then outside of that, you supplement it when necessary, but you don't make that. That's where teams get in trouble, right? Like SC right now has been inverted in their logic of thinking in terms of geography. Oregon has not, right? And you're able to build a little bit more of a consistent program that way. And I'm not trying to knock everything that they do, sure, but when you have those players within a region, you know, like when we're at Washington, our brand only went so far. You know, Boise State had a bigger brand when we walked into a school in Houston, right? And that was just more based off the recent success that they had and the players that they had recruited from there, right? So brand recognition, brand awareness, I always talk about, that's really, really important. And I think you're just building on top of that. You're a widely recognized brand around the country, but your brand's the strongest within that West Coast footprint.
Cooper, we'll get you out with this one here. And I'm going to ask you to kind of think back a couple of years to Dante Moore and what you remember about him as a prep recruit, because I think the odds are pretty likely he ends up being Oregon's starter this year. And let's be real, like the success of the 2025 season is probably contingent on him being a capable or above average quarterback. I'm not going to ask you what he's developed in over the last couple of years because you haven't been following that part as closely, but what impressed you broadly when he was a prep player, and just kind of like what stylistically can Oregon fans maybe expect to see from him if ultimately he does win the job?
Yeah, great question. I mean, a guy that had one of the strongest resumes in the country coming out of MLK in Detroit. You know, you think about over 3 years, what he was able to accomplish there as a starter. Excuse me. But, you know, I think the biggest thing with him, what I loved, was his ability to play within himself. And what I mean by that is a guy that had a great understanding of his skill set. And I don't want to say limitations, but where he excelled was like the intangibles of the game, right? I mean, sure, he can make every throw on the field. He had good suddenness in the pocket, good quickness, but the processing ability was really phenomenal, right? And the experience really kind of showed up on the tape, and he got better year over year over year. Game came easy to him. Goes out to UCLA, and we see flashes of that. And I felt like he kind of got away from it. Saw this with Darian Mensah this year, the Tulane quarterback transfer, who got off to a great start as a redshirt freshman. And then, you know, tail end of the season, it's almost like you start reading about yourself a little bit too much, and you start playing a little bit different brand of ball. And I think with Dante at UCLA, it wasn't the best situation for him to succeed behind the offensive line before, you know, a true freshman, obviously, with all that weight. I love the fact that him and his family had the maturity enough to take a step back and say, you know what, we're going to go get that redshirt year back. We're going to sit, we're going to develop, and we're going to try to learn and get this right and kind of course correct. So I'm excited for him, man. The ability has always been there. You know, what I saw as a freshman was a guy that was really, really willing to take a lot more chances than he was in high school. In high school, he was very calculated, very careful with the ball, didn't turn it over a lot. And his first year at UCLA, it felt like a 5-star trying to live up to the billing, trying to do too much and will his team to victory. I think in Oregon, the feel is going to be like, hey, I'm surrounded by the same caliber of player at every single position. So I need to get back to doing what I do. And I think he's a high-level game manager, and I get it. People are always, you know, talking about game managers like that's a diss. It's not a diss. His ability to stay ahead of the chains on first and second down, you know, is a unique attribute, right? So I think that's what it's going to come down to. I think the year under Will Stein not playing, being able to sit behind the quarterbacks that he's been able to sit behind, it's all going to do him really, really good. So I'm excited for him, excited to see him in the spring and kind of see how much he's progressed since that 1 year at UCLA.
Cooper, thanks for time, man. Really appreciate it. Enjoy your downtime before things get going again. But I guess in today's world of recruiting, it never stops, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'll try, man. I'll do my best. I appreciate y'all having me on as always.
Yeah, always good, Cooper.
Thanks, guys.